Good afternoon, anti-novelists. I have a boo-boo. I picked a fight with a can of baked beans and I lost terribly. So today I will be using the Kathleen Spracklin method of using a pointer to direct your attention. So this video is part 2 on using the plot box and incorporating all of that writing and researching and planning and drafting into your Zettelkasten process. So let's get right to it. Yesterday, I left you off with a detailed walkthrough of the 8 plot point plot box and how you might take a simple story and incorporate that into your plot box. Let's answer a couple of quick questions. Number 1, are these cards that you're making when you're working out this story that we talked about yesterday about the guy going fishing? Are those bib cards? No. There are no bib cards in this system because this stuff is largely coming out of your imagination. So there is no primary source to cite. You are the primary source, my friend. So no, these would not be considered bib cards. Now, if you were doing research, let's say you pulled your handy dandy field guide to field and stream fishing and you collected a few details that would inform the part where your guy goes fishing, that would definitely need a bib card because you're using a primary reference in order to populate the details of that part of the story. So only in that case would you need a bib card. In the other instance, the cards that we're referring to, these are main cards. These are cards that have the actual details on them from which you will build your story. Thirdly, what about the index? How does the index fit into this? The simple answer is the index occurs within the plot box itself. As you move around and sequence and file these main cards that you're using to get your story written, they're going to come to live in the section of the plot box where they end up being installed at the end of the day. So you can index things by your book title, which is what I did. Chapter 2 in my book, Zettelkasten for Fiction Writers, is all about the plot box and how to build one and what to do with it. The final section in that chapter is an introduction to the story Bible. The story Bible is what this box becomes when you're all done with the writing, because it contains all of the cards that you use to write that book. Therefore, over in your index, let's say, let's title our pretend fisherman story Gone Fishin', just for the fun of it. So that would be filed in your index under G for Gone Fishin', and you would know when you go to the index and you look up that story that it is installed in the plot box. And for our purposes here for this example, we're going to label this story, this plot box for this fish story that we're writing. We're going to start it at 9,000. So the first action that occurs in the story is going to fall under 9001, okay, which corresponds to the first thing that happens. Here it's 7001 because 7000 is my novel. In our pretend story, it's 9001 because 9000 is this pretend story that we're writing. So let's get into what all of this looks like. So I've got my first card here. My first card just has some character notes on it. And as you're thinking about the things that you might want to include to either drive the action or motivate the character, include those things on the main cards that you will then tuck into your box for safekeeping so you can write from them. Things that I've included about this main fisherman character. Fear drives motivation, okay? So what is he afraid of? Well, what if he has a fear of water? That could be a super cool thing for him to have to confront when he decides to go on this adventurous fishing trip. What if he is very uncomfortable in the outdoors? Again, that's telling you something about what's going on inside of this character, and those things are going to help you drive how you write the story. As a third option, grief. What if he lost his outdoorsman father and his will to reconnect with nature is very strong? Therefore, when he makes this decision to go on this fishing trip and catches this little fish that he's so proud of, he's being driven by some very powerful motivators. This is all of the important pre-writing work that you're doing on your note cards and tucking into your box. So if I were going to tuck this into my box, I would take my pencil, I would pencil in 9001 because this card might not ultimately end up living at 9001 exactly. Maybe it gets shifted to 9002 or 3. So I pencil in my first numbers when I start, and then when I'm finished writing the story or the book, I go in and I go over those numbers with pen and install them where they actually live in the plot box forever. So I have a couple of other cards here that we need to consider. This is a card from yesterday's episode. This is the one that says that he went up to the mountain stream and caught his little fish. I've labeled this one 9003 or 9004. Again, I'm just penciling in how I want to sequence out this story. So in my box, again, we're going to pretend these are the 9000s, not the 7000s. So 9001 is going to go there. 9003 and 4, you can see the 003 card is my inciting incident. My 003 card is grasping at straws. So I've got a plot beat and a major plot point there. So I'm just going to tuck that in right there. Let's see what else we have. The next card that I've got, it's from my experience collection. This is something that you'll learn about in a later chapter of the book. I believe it is in chapter 9, part 904. The experience collection is something that I'm going to teach you to build in your Zettelkasten that is literally what it sounds like. It's collecting things, observations, thoughts from your daily life. Maybe you're taking a walk and you notice the play of wind across water. And that makes you think the sunshine on the water is like liquid crystals. Okay, see how that's working there? This is collecting an observable detail that maybe you noticed on a walk during your afternoon or whatever, something you observed, but it struck you. Something about it was poetic, something about it seemed profound or interesting. They're your details, they're your experiences. You collect the ones that make sense to you that apply in the realm of your story. So I've just labeled this one Lake. You'll notice I've already penciled in 9004. Well, why did I do that? Let's look. Remember, over here in 9003 and 4, I've got my guy going up to the mountain stream to go fishing. So bingo, I've got a little observable experience that I collected from my afternoon walk, and I'm going to tuck that in behind the card that tells me what he's doing. So now we've got a scene. He goes to the stream. The sequel of that trip is he catches a fish. And here's a little bit of experience that helps me inform that scene when I sit down to do the writing. See how those fit together? So I'm going to slip them right back into that slot between 3 and 4, because for right now, that's where they live in our story. Now, here, I have dialogue at question. Now, dialogue cards is another section of your Zettelkasten that I will help you and encourage you to build out as you're reading through my book. What I'm teaching you is have a section of dialogue. This is another part of experience collecting. Interesting things that you hear that could take place as dialogue between characters, that could be a thought as the internal monologue of a character. This one is labeled question, so it tells me I've got an interesting question. This could be labeled conversation, in that it's something that takes place between two people. This could be labeled argument. It's an argument between people. Whatever kind of dialogue or things that your character might say. What if your character's from the Deep South? Maybe you collect a collection of quotes and funny things that they say, like, girl, you are dumb as a rock. See? You're collecting things that can inform your story character's voice. That, my friends, is a pro tip. Because then when you sit down to write that character, you go to your dialogue section, you pull out those cards that inform that character's voice, and you can immediately snap into what they sound like and write them authentically. So what's on this card? Can you afford an honest answer? What will you pay? I love that. I love that so much. Because what this is reminding me is it's reminding me that my character goes out, catches his little fish, remember? And he takes that little fish back to his friend to share this beautiful experience that he's just had. And rather than being happy for him or listening in an authentic way, his friend just dismisses this whole profound experience that he's had and says, oh, I went to the factory and I bought myself a big fish. So how does that play out in your plot box? Well, the question card needs to go here with this revelation card. So I've already numbered this one 9009C. Let's go over to the 009C and look at what lives there. 009C. In my plot box, that's labeled the first battle, okay? So the first battle is telling me that this interaction with this quote unquote friend is not exactly a friendly thing. Instead, this shallow response is revealing to our sweet character that this person is in fact not a real friend. And that's why it's labeled first battle, revelation, friends. Because our sweet fisherman is learning that this person is not a real friend and cannot be trusted, right? That's important. So I'm going to take those two cards and I'm going to slot them in behind that 009C spot, just because I'm marking that place in my story. There's 06, and there is my 009 first battle C card. Sorry, that's blurry, but you know where I'm at. So I'm going to slot those in there. Let's keep going. Next card is when his quote-unquote friend replies and tells him, well, it's so nice you had your little fishing trip and conquered your fear of the outdoors, and yeah, your dad's dead and that stinks, but yeah, whatever. I went and bought a big fish. Yeah, what a great guy, right? So I've labeled this midpoint and who I am. Now, you might remember from yesterday, the midpoint is often a place in a standard conflict-driven narrative where our good writing coach James Scott Bell tells us the midpoint is where your character looks in the mirror and says, who am I? What have I become? What have I turned into? So perhaps this interaction with this quote-unquote friend is where our sweet character starts to look at what he's become. So let's take this. You see that is 9012D, and let's just slot that behind my midpoint card, all right? And so even though that says 7, we know we switched that to a 9. So this is now 9012D, and it is my midpoint. So I'm slotting that behind my midpoint. My final card is labeled 9012D or possibly 9015. This is where he has his sad and baffled reaction, and he can't believe that this person is behaving this way, and has the realization that this is not a real friend. So we know from installing our previous card that our 012D is the midpoint, but and we've got our little placeholder there. Let's see what the 015 card is. We've got our mirror moment. Ooh, the 015 is labeled the second battle, the second pinch point, the opposition. How can I show the opposition or show the antagonistic force? See what I did there? Now, because of the way that this person has reacted and because of the realization that our sweet fisherman friend has had about this person, I am going to install this at 9015. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lightly pencil through so I can still see that 012D in case I want to make a change later. But for right now, I want this to go behind that 015E card, that second battle, that second pinch point that shows me the opposition or the antagonistic force, because now we know this not friend person is our antagonist. Bada boom. So it goes right there. Now, see how that allows me to use the cards that I've created, the cards that I have collected, say from my experiences, from dialogue that I've overheard, from conversations that I've made up in my head, dialing into my character voice, free writing, and just free exploring the details of the story. As I said, maybe I grabbed my field and stream guide and looked up some things about lakes and streams to make observations. Sorry about the blender in the background. If you can hear that, I apologize. But that's how that all comes together. And ultimately, all of those story details now live sequenced in your plot box under their corresponding numbers. So that's how you're going to guide yourself through using those numbers penciled in to put that story together and to start drafting it out. And then you'll notice, if you look over here just super quick in my Scrivener, you will see, I hope you can see that, you will see, if you look along that left margin, you'll see this is the outline for the book that I'm writing for you, and you'll see I've written it in exactly the same way. I've got the major number, consider these the plot points that happen underneath it, and they just get sequenced right under whatever chapter they're in. So it doesn't matter what you're writing. If you're writing fiction, you're writing nonfiction, however you're putting those things together, it all works the same. You just sequence those things in your plot box system. You allow yourself the freedom to experiment and just shift and move those cards around however it makes sense to you for your story. And then when you sit down to write, you're going to go to that section. You're going to pull out, let's pick a good one. I want my late card. This is my late card, yeah. When you're ready to sit down and write, you're going to go to that section and say, okay, today I am ready to rock. I'm ready to write this scene where this sweet fisherman goes up to the beautiful lake to catch that fish that is going to give him that profound experience with nature. I pull out these cards. I've got my details at hand that remind me of what I want to include, and I just lay them aside and I draft it out. I draft it out longhand, always in my coil bound storybook, which I don't have right here, but it's just an 8.5 by 11 coil bound book, fine lined. I draft it out by hand, write out my details, and then I go over there to my Scrivener and I transfer that more finished draft into my Scrivener off of my handwritten longhand notes. And that's it, guys. That is how you include the numbering and start to incorporate the plot box as part of the way that you get the story written. So we'll continue this conversation in the next video. We're going to go to another kind of story. I'm going to walk you through this same process, just using a different story structure. So it's going to be super fun. I hope this is helpful. I'm having a blast. I hope you guys are finding your way as we move through it. That's it. I'll leave you there for today, and I will see you in the next video.